Your brain is pulling off a high-stakes heist 24/7. It's constantly stealing a huge chunk of your body's resources just to keep the lights on. And it's an operation that absolutely cannot fail, not even for a minute. So let's dive into this incredible life support system.
4 minutes. That's it. That is the absolutely terrifyingly short window of time before a lack of blood flow starts doing permanent, irreversible damage to your brain cells. It's the ticking clock that's at the very heart of this whole story.
And that right there is the big question, isn't it? If the stakes are that high, what kind of brilliant, what kind of foolproof system is in place to make sure that this critical supply line never, ever gets cut?
Okay, so here's the fundamental problem. Unlike your muscles, your liver, your brain can't store fuel. It literally lives paycheck to paycheck, second by second. And it's completely dependent on the blood that shows up. It has this massive appetite, but a $0 savings account.
And just how big is that appetite? Well, we're talking about almost a full liter of blood rushing through your brain every single minute. Think about that. That's something like 15 to 20% of all the blood your heart pumps out, all going to an organ that's only about 2% of your body's weight. It's incredibly greedy.
So to pull off this mission, the brain's circulation has some really incredible built-in features. You can think of these as the getaway routes and the security plans that are built right into the architecture of the whole system.
Now, before we see the master plan, we need to get this key concept down: anastomosis. Really, all it means is creating a network of cross-connections between blood vessels. So instead of one road, you have a whole grid. It's a biological backup plan, so you don't have all your eggs in one basket.
And this is the perfect example of that idea in action. The circle of Willis is basically a traffic circle for the arteries at the base of your brain. All the major arteries feeding your brain, the internal carotids, the basilar artery, they all hook up right here. So if one of those main highways gets a major blockage, no problem. The blood can just reroute through the circle to get where it needs to go. It's an absolutely brilliant way to prevent a catastrophe.
Now, the brain isn't just worried about getting blood, it is extremely picky about what's in the blood. And that's where the blood-brain barrier comes in. It's like a vault door, or maybe a better analogy is an incredibly strict bouncer at the most exclusive club in town. It lets in the good stuff, the VIPs like oxygen and CO2, but it keeps all the riffraff out. Neurotoxins, stray hormones, bacteria, anything that could wreak havoc on the brain's very delicate environment.
Okay, so we've got the pipes, we've got the security, but the system is so much more than just a static blueprint. It's smart plumbing, it's alive. Let's take a look at how it actively manages where all that blood goes and when.
So the brain has two main tricks up its sleeve for this. It's called auto-regulation. On one side, you've got the myogenic system. This one responds to physical changes in blood pressure, and its main job is just to protect the pipes. Then you've got the metabolic system, which responds to chemical changes, specifically CO2, to make sure the hardest working parts of the brain get the most resources.
Let's look at that myogenic response first. It's just elegantly simple, really. When your body's overall blood pressure spikes, the blood vessels in your brain automatically squeeze down. They constrict to protect all those delicate little capillaries downstream. And if your blood pressure drops, they do the exact opposite. They open up, they dilate to try and keep the flow nice and steady.
But like any system, it has its limits. If your blood pressure drops way too low, those vessels just can't dilate any further. At that point, blood flow to the brain starts to plummet, and you faint. Really, fainting is the system's last-ditch emergency brake. It forces your body horizontal, making it way easier for your heart to get blood back up to your head.
All right, now for the metabolic side. This is where things get really clever. This is how the brain directs traffic. See, when a bunch of your neurons are firing and working hard, they produce more carbon dioxide as a waste product. And that little rise in CO2 acts as a powerful local signal, telling the nearby blood vessels, hey, we're busy over here. Open up and bring in more oxygenated blood. It is a perfect supply and demand system, happening constantly all over your brain. But what happens when the entire brain is under threat? Not just one little part, but the whole thing. Well, that's when the body pulls the fire alarm. It's a dangerous, last resort mechanism called the Cushing reflex. To get this, you have to remember something called the Monro-Kelly doctrine. Basically, your skull is a solid, rigid box, and it's filled with three things you can't compress: brain tissue, blood, and cerebrospinal fluid. So if one of those things starts to increase in volume, like from a brain bleed or a growing tumor, it has no choice but to start crushing the other two.
And guess what's the easiest thing to crush? The blood vessels.
So when the brainstem senses that it's literally being squeezed and starved of blood, it launches a desperate counterattack. It hits the big red panic button, triggering a massive fight or flight response throughout the whole body. This causes your systemic blood pressure to skyrocket to insane levels. Why? It's trying to physically force blood past that compression and into the brain. But here's the weird part. Pressure sensors elsewhere in your body detect this crazy high blood pressure, and they try to slow the heart down to compensate, creating this bizarre, chaotic mix of signals.
And this dramatic life-or-death event leaves behind some very specific clues. Clinical fingerprints that doctors are trained to look for. It's called Cushing's triad, and it is 1. Dangerously high blood pressure, 2. A paradoxically slow heart rate, and 3. An irregular breathing pattern because the brainstem itself is being compressed. When a doctor sees this, they know it's a major neurological emergency.
So, we've seen the backup plans and the emergency alarms. Now, let's bring it back a little and look at more common, temporary failures of the system and what they can actually teach us.
We've already mentioned syncope, or what everyone just calls fainting. At its absolute core, it's just that, a temporary, sudden drop in blood flow to the brain, just enough of a drop to cause you to briefly lose consciousness.
And sometimes the problem has nothing to do with the brain's plumbing at all. Sometimes the problem is with the main pump, the heart. In conditions like Stokes-Adams syndrome or sick sinus syndrome, the heart's own electrical system starts to fail. And if the heart can't pump effectively, it can't get enough blood up to the brain, which can lead to fainting spells.
Okay, now this is absolutely fascinating. Remember that smart metabolic response we talked about? Well, a panic attack can actually hijack it. When someone hyperventilates, they start breathing so fast that they blow off way too much CO2 from their blood. The brain's sensors misinterpret this lack of CO2 as a sign that the brain isn't very active. So it does what it's programmed to do. It constricts the blood vessels to reduce flow, accidentally starving itself of oxygen and causing that person to feel dizzy, lightheaded, or even faint. The system basically outsmarts itself.
And really, that just sums the whole thing up, doesn't it? The system for getting blood to our brain is an absolute masterpiece of engineering. It's redundant, it's responsive, it's incredibly intelligent. But that total dependence on a constant, second-by-second flow also makes it profoundly fragile. It's this incredible system working tirelessly and silently in the background, pulling off that perfect heist to keep you alive and aware every single second of your life. It's brilliant, for sure, but it is not invincible. Which kind of makes you stop and think, right? What choices are you making every single day to protect the most critical supply line you will ever have?